Welcome back, everyone, to the only place you're getting practical information, I would assume, on how to actually run a law firm in 2025. I am your co host, Lauren Lester, with the incomparable Matthew Kurbis joining me. And to,
Yes. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for doing this again.
I love it. This has been so fun. So, today we are going to talk about how do we actually get law firm clients? In other words, how do we market our law firms, generate leads, do business development? And we'll get into the real nitty gritty about what the actual flow looks like for each of our firms. But I just want to start talking about my general strategy. This isn't something that I have written down necessarily anywhere. So, Matthew, I don't know about you, but I wing it sometimes, see
I
what
I
works.
Yeah, and here's the thing is probably there are some all they do is coach lawyers how to get business development style folks out there that they can go deep on every one of the things we're going to be talking today. And you and I, Lauren, might even be able to do a multi-part series just on this topic, but it's really important, I think, to still have a high level. And at the end of this, Lauren, you and I, we will have at least a transcript of what we do. So it will be written down. How about that for us?
There we go. Oh, there we go. A win already. We haven't even jumped in. So, my marketing strategy, first and foremost, I did go through and think about my target client. So, I really wanted to make sure that anything I created, no matter what the channel was, I spoke to them. So, for me, that is kind of the everyday person. They often have pretty solid jobs, they have a house, they are planning for retirement. In most cases, they have young families or at least kiddos who are about to go off to college, kind of that demographic. Matthew, what are you thinking about when you're putting together marketing for your target client? Who is that person that you're talking to?
Yeah, I think about things in a similar way, and even just to provide more context, like if this is your first episode in this series, Lauren and I have talked about previously how we've both pivoted in the types of law that we practice. So that was really good, Lauren. I just want to say that first because you pivoted recently, so you've had to recreate like your ideal customer, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it was nice to be able to lean on what I did before, but yeah, it was kind of starting from square one and really thinking about who is this new person that's looking for help, that really kind of feels on unshaky ground financially and really wants to get on something more solid.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the hard things to do, and it's still hard for me, even though I've been doing this for around 3 years now, is like being willing to narrow the scope of who you want to have as a client, as an ideal client, and yet keep it broad enough and not so narrow that you're keeping people out. So like in the beginning, and this is still true for me, but I like for my client to work at my price point because I think pricing and how you price your services comes into how you define your ideal client. At my price point, which is meant to be super, super affordable, I need to be able to streamline everything, right? So they need to be tech savvy. Now, I have loosened the definition of tech savvy, having been in practice for myself for 3 years now, because originally I did not even want to interface with my client until they signed up to pay. Because I figured, hey, $20 a month to get started. That's a really good deal. You get legal advice right away. But folks still wanted to even have like a starter conversation with me. So, like, my biggest takeaway from like my first 6 months of operations was make it really easy for somebody to book a call and you come at it from a really interesting perspective. I know because you did website stuff before you started before you went to law school. Like I didn't even do any of that. Like I didn't even think about that stuff. But for me, having like a form on the website too, where then they could they could ask their questions in written form, adding that, which I also did not have right away, that has been hit or miss. I'd say more than half of the inbound I get through that kind of thing is just from people who want to sell my firm something. Even janitorial services, even though it says on my website, this is a virtual law firm. So I'm even thinking about turning that off, but I'm on the fence about it because then the website maybe looks less professional. And so maybe folks think this isn't a real law firm. So for now, I'm keeping it there, but I mostly don't get clients through that. But the idea is that they're tech savvy. So they get in, and at a minimum, I need to know that they could click on a link on my website and schedule a call with me because that is how they will schedule calls with me. So even in the beginning, I'm sort of setting that client expectation of yes, my ideal client is tech savvy and they are comfortable with clicking a button to schedule a call with me and not just picking up the phone and calling me. And I know this has turned into like a website conversation, but it's kind of related, right? Like it's all related to your ideal client. and interrupt me at any time. But this is for my last point, I'll wrap up here is I do not advertise my phone number on my website. It's there if you know where to find it and look for it, right? There's like a button at the bottom with like that's like the image of a phone that if you click on it, it will call. But I don't like advertise the phone number. For my Google business profile, my phone number is there if folks want to get a hold of me. And what I have found though is most people who call me, it's just to try to sell me something. And so, at least for me, narrowing that, I know it might be too narrow for some lawyers, but for me, it's really important because it's just me, and if I'm only dealing with people who actually click on a video call for an intro call, then I know they're serious. They're less likely to spam me. And that's sort of at the bare minimum my ideal client.
That free connection with you, I think is really important. I talk about it as a consult, you can talk about it as an initial call, however you wanna word it, but I really struggle with attorneys who make folks pay to find out if they're a good attorney fit for them, and I
Mhm.
just don't think that that's how that really works for legal consumers. I mean, just think about if you were trying to buy any other service and they were like, "Yeah, well, you're gonna have to pay to find anything out about my business." So I agree with you. My consults are free and they have to do them on the website. I do estate planning. So as you can imagine, I do get some folks I have had that they don't have an email and they're not in my target market. Like I would love to work with them and they're usually such lovely people. But like you, I keep my prices affordable by streamlining everything. And if I have to work with somebody who can't fit into that streamlined process, it's just not going to work. So even small things, there are a million estate planning attorneys out there who can help that person. I always have to remind myself, right? I'm not the only one, but really identifying in terms of the flow. What do you need your consumers to do to be able to work with you? I do have my phone number on my website is way down at the bottom, so I agree with you. I do get most of the calls that I get are for folks trying to sell me something, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. And so I do try and redirect most potential leads to fill out the online scheduler to schedule a consult with me. It's free. They can pick a time that works for them. And then even folks who do end up calling, because some folks will, asking to schedule for a consultation, the message on my phone is if you're looking to schedule a consultation, go to the website because A, it's just me and getting back to folks sometimes can be a challenge. And I'm also very upfront about that. Like you're going to have to wait to get a response. But to be quite honest, if you want to do this, you can go do it right now. You don't need to wait for me to respond to you. So I really try and direct everyone to that initial part of the funnel, which is schedule a consultation. And I do have an intake form, kind of like you do, that asks for basic info that really just allows me to disqualify people. So if somebody types in there, I'm looking for immigration help, I'm like, I don't do that. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to waste my time getting on a call about that. But it's really bare bones because I want to have as little friction. So to your point, they've got to be able to be tech savvy, but I'm also really trying to make the process smooth for them.
Right, and this was one of the fun things that we discovered about each other is I have a similar message on my phone system, and and part of the reason like, part of the way I even came up with that message was I I had, like, time constraints because it can only be so long, right? It's like I actually had to script it out, so I made sure I got to it in time, but not talk too fast that folks are not gonna understand. But the gist of it is it says, "Hey, the best way to get a hold of me is to go to subscriptionattorney.com and schedule a call." If you're not a client, here's how you do that. If you are a client, sign into your portal. If you're an attorney, I have a special link for you. And like that's it. I did run that by some folks in my life. Like I was like, hey, listen to this. How does this sound? What do you think? And universally, so I don't know what this says about me. All of them were like, well, what if I just want to leave you a message and talk to you? It's like, oh yeah, like that is also important, right? Like I'd rather you not, but I will say at the end, and I will eventually return your call. So I added that at the end because sometimes people want to leave a message, and if it's worth returning their call, I will. The people who mostly ignore that message are attorneys I'm on a transaction with, and I will just call them back. But I do not like listen to voicemails as soon as they come in. I try to limit that to once a day just to be in control of my time.
Yeah, and I think there's a balance here because folks listening may be like, you all just don't want to talk to anybody. And that's not the case at all. I find I want to talk to folks when I am fully focused on being able to talk to them and provide value. So I cannot sit there and have my phone just ring. Again, I'm the only one. I don't have a assistant. I have to be the one to answer it if I'm going to answer it. And it's a trade-off. It's a balance between being able to answer the phone constantly, but then being interrupted on what I'm trying to do versus telling someone, I would love to chat with you. I want to listen to everything that you have to say, but we've got to schedule that time. So you have to find the balance and I think explain it to folks in a way that they get that. Have you ever gotten pushback from people other than maybe other attorneys who are like, "Listen, I get it. Just call me back when you can." Like clients who are like, I don't know, this rubs me the wrong way."
Yeah, I certainly have gotten a little bit of pushback, but at the same time, I say, one of the ways I'm able to offer the prices that I offer is because this is the way I do things so that the processes are streamlined so I can continue to offer affordable pricing. And most of my clients who have already even subscribed at the $20 a month, they get it. They're like, I get it. Like the reason they even have the $20 a month is it does act as a good mechanism to engage in an attorney client engagement, there being consideration and all that, but also it's a way for me to know, like, okay, like they're going to bring me all their legal things. That way I could offer affordable pricing. So like I do kind of explain the business model a little bit to clients. And that said, like most of my clients are not necessarily retail clients. Like I'm interfacing more with small business owners, be they like us, solopreneurs, or they have a mom and pop shop or a brick and mortar, right? Like other types of small business owners. So like talking to a business savvy person most of the time, not always. So they get it. They totally get it. But even the everyday consumers, they hire me mostly because I'm the most affordable attorney. So I say I could continue to offer these low prices because, this is how you schedule time to talk to me. If I was picking up the phone, when am I going to get your simple estate plan done? Or when am I going to get, your prenup, finalized? So, I have to, this is how I have to do it. And they get it. And I've even been thinking about recording like a small video or something that I could like have in the FAQs that just explains this because I probably explain it once a month.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea. I love the use of videos and that might lead us right into taking a step back and how do we actually get the folks to then go to the website to then schedule a call that they are interested enough in our services. So for me, like you mentioned, I certainly when I started leaned into what I knew and I very much recognize that this is not common for most attorneys, but coming from the web development space, I said I'm going to get my website up and running. I still think that's something most attorneys need to have a good website with a clear message that clearly defines the problem and quite frankly doesn't talk about themselves. I don't have an about page on my website. It's actually just goes to this little tiny blurb on the homepage that really talks about what I do for clients, not anything. I don't have what school I went to. I don't have my bar associations. I don't have anything like that on the website because I really just don't think potential clients care. But that is where I started as I thought, where do folks go to look for help? Google. So, how do I get in front of the folks on Google who are looking for the problems that I solve? How do you, Matthew, get in front of small business owners, mom and pop shops who are very busy, like you said themselves, and running their own businesses? Where are they going to find you?
Yeah, and that is another reason why like you and I are the perfect pair to do something like this. I also do not have an about me section on my website. Like think about when you're buying something as a consumer of anything. Like, do I wanna know the person who's selling it to me first? Like, maybe eventually, right? Like, maybe eventually, but when you make it easy to have a conversation, to schedule a 15-minute conversation with that person, like, that could be a better way to get to know them than an about me section on a website. I have considered lately maybe putting my picture or something on the website, but as I think about more and more video stuff on the website, that will be me, and that will be me talking, and I think that's gonna better convey to a potential client, "Hey, here's who this attorney is who I'm hiring," rather than, "I went to this law school and I did this." They wanna know, "Can you solve my problem or help me avoid it? And how much does it cost?" Like, that's what I care
Done.
about.
Yep.
Right? So, no about me page. But since I'm mostly working with small business owners, even though I'm a virtual law firm and I do have clients across the state of Illinois and some clients outside the state who are transacting in my state, I mostly like have local clients. Like my business is inherently local. People hire you in particular in the professional space because they know, like, and trust you. And so I am super, super involved in my community. I'm on 4 boards, 4 nonprofit boards. 2 of them are like bona fide 501(c)(3) nonprofits. They're very local, they're very small. And the other is my local chamber of commerce, which is I forget the particular designation. And the other one is like a nonprofit under the local municipality ordinances, but it's not like a formally organized nonprofit. So I'm super involved in my community with things I care about that I have fun with and that will better and improve the community for my child, for my family, and I happen to get business from it. And I think that's not necessarily something that like a lawyer coach is going to tell you to do. Like you want to be maybe more strategic about that. But at the end of the day, everybody knows somebody. I just make sure they know I'm an attorney and I work it in organically to conversations or situations. And I'm not afraid to give legal information and point out that it's legal information and not legal advice when I'm in these settings. And a lot of it's in person. And so one of the other reasons I have to have client scheduled calls with me or potential clients because I've scheduled and blocked this time to be in person. And since it's all local, it's all 10 minutes away. So nothing's too crazy about that. But like most of my business these days are from in person networking and local volunteering that I do.
And we found a way that we differ, which I love. I hate in-person networking. I know I need to get better at it, but I think one of the best things about building your own practice is that you can lean into and do what makes the most sense to you initially and what you're comfortable with. I don't think you can totally disregard some of the other avenues. I don't think you can disregard social media. I don't think you can disregard in-person networking. I don't think you can disregard video. Like all of that, I don't think we can run a business in today's market without at least doing something on. But if networking and being in the community and being an active member on these boards is what works for you and gets you business, like fantastic. It is a goal of mine to do a little bit more in 2025. So I will say that. But historically has not been where I thrive. Like I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel like I convey myself as well as I would honestly on a video, which is just my personality. But I think that's such a great way to a little bit marry the two. It's not necessarily in person, but you can still give that real time demonstration, how you talk, how you explain things, your mannerisms, just the person kind of gets a sense of like, yeah, this is definitely somebody I would want to work with. So I have really leaned in this last year to video across the board. It's mostly been on YouTube and TikTok because those are the biggest platforms. And it's a lot of information. Like you said, it's just saying, what does tax debt resolution mean? What do I do if I get this letter? How do I make sure that my 2-year-old is going to be taken care of if something happens to me, right? I'm about to get married. I have this house. What do I need to think about for this new partnership? Just all of those questions that folks have to be able to answer them with just information gives folks such a good sense of like, oh, I get it now. And yes, I need help. I'm going to call her. So I think video is such a great marketing channel, a marketing tool to lean into, whether you put it on your website, you use YouTube, second biggest search engine in the world, right? Folks are going to be there. You might as well be in front of them. But have you thought at all about what other than kind of putting something on your website about like who you are and how you practice, any other videos that you've thought about creating?
Yeah, absolutely. And in large part inspired by your TikTok episode on a different practice. Because when I heard that, I was like, okay, I've already known I needed to get into video, but if Lauren's doing it, she's talking about it, you got to. But something I do want to point out, even before I share with the listener like what I've been doing in that space and what I'm developing, is like all those questions that you asked are also standard like SEO style questions,
Mm,
right? Like these are the questions folks are looking for in Google, in whatever search engine, DuckDuckGo, that they're using. Brave browser, I know they've got their own proprietary search now, and like that's exactly the types of questions you want to be thinking about when you're asking, when you're making these videos, right? So like what I've come up with, because nothing I ever like to do is a straight line, is I've come up with the Law for Kids podcast. And fun story, it actually got banned from TikTok. And I'm not entirely sure why, because they gave me a warning and they said, hey, you're violating our terms of how, creation and all that stuff. And I read it. I was like, okay, I read it. Like, I'm not sure where, but if you point it out, or let me know, I'll make sure I'll comply. So, so ultimately what happened is I was permanently banned because the content is made for kids that are too young to be on TikTok is what I think. That's what I think. That, or if you want to get all conspiracy theory about it, China doesn't want the youths of the United States to understand things about the law. So I don't necessarily think that, but hey, look, there's some folks out there that might think that. And look, at the end of the day, the content is for the kids. The Law for Kids podcast, like explaining things like what is negligence, what are damages, what's the statute of limitations, criminal versus civil. And I get to record it with my daughter, which is amazing, right? She comes into my studio, she goes up to the mic and she goes, testing, testing, one, two, three. so,
Which is the
so
best part of every episode.
yeah, I mean, yeah, she, obviously I will edit that part out, but she, like, her voice is the best part without question. She says the name of the podcast and she asks the question, what is negligence? Like, that's her voice. It's her question to like really tune in those young listeners. I don't expect like kids to be listening to the podcast on their own. I expect it to be adults, grown-ups, parents, teachers, counselors, like watching it and sharing it with the kids in their lives. So I still don't think I should have been banned from TikTok. But after that ban happened, I kind of took a pause and now I've just been gearing up a backlog of content for 2025 to make sure that I'm publishing it every single week. And even though with only like 8 or so episodes out there at the time that we're recording now in 2024, I got a client from it. So, like, it definitely works, and it's designed to be 1 minute, and now that YouTube Shorts is you can do it up to 3 minutes, I might actually expand that because TikTok, is not an option for me to publish anyway, and the 1-minute constraint was also really hard, but having a constraint, I think, is a good thing, and I'm also trying to leverage some legal AI tools that I use to come up with scripts that are around 150 to 180 words so that I can really just focus in and, like, get it under a minute or around that minute mark. So that's been my experience so far. So at the time that everybody's listening to this, you could check it out on all the platforms and lawforkidspodcast.com or www.lawforkidspodcast.com because Substack powers it and you need to have a subdomain for that. So you got to use the www. It redirects obviously, but sometimes it doesn't. We don't want to get too technical here. But that's really my big push for 2025 for marketing and getting the word out is just broad legal concepts. Because after all, I am broad general counsel, like fractional GC, that could help people avoid most expensive legal problems. And by getting that stuff out there, that increases brand awareness. But it's also hard, Lauren. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, because like with the video stuff, it's national, international, right? We practice state law. So like that's been another hurdle for me to just get over it and just do the stuff. But like, what has been your experience with that side of things?
Yeah, I'm really intentional about making sure, especially for the state specific practice areas, that I say in Colorado so that folks know that if you happen to catch my video and you're sitting in New York, yes, you may find it helpful, hopefully still, about the information, but it's most likely not going to apply in your state. I did get the added benefit when I added tax debt resolution, which is a national service. So I sort of widened my net there in terms of the market. But I think you just have to be really intentional and smart. And you may feel like you're repeating yourself. I had to get over this hurdle of like, I say that little snippet, the same thing in every video. Aren't folks going to find that boring or repetitive? And they don't, because first of all, most folks are not sitting there going through every single video. And if they are, they're likely going to be your next call to make a sale, right? They're in with you. So that's not a bad thing. And it's usually, especially how these algorithms are working now and everyone is moving towards the TikTok interest based algorithm versus follower based algorithm. Whatever you think about TikTok, that is where the market is going. Right? You're going to just pop up on somebody's feed and they're going to see one video. So I have to make sure of the 400 videos that are on there, if you get number 273, it still says Colorado. So I love your idea. And I do this too of using AI to help generate because sometimes when you make the first 50, then you're like, and now what do I say? So AI can be really great if you have an idea and kind of a rough outline of putting something together. And then I also found a really great trick. You know, when you go into a search engine like Google, I'm assuming the other ones will work like this. And you just type in a common question. So, child support in Colorado or, business formation in Illinois, whatever it is. There's always those like 5 or 6 questions that Google kind of puts, and you can use the accordion to open them up. What I didn't realize initially is when you open one up, it opens more up at the bottom. And so I started to just put in general topics when I couldn't think of like, what are the common questions folks ask about getting an IRS letter. And I would just open up a bunch of those accordions until I got like 20 different questions and then copied those, just the questions, into a Word document and then used each question to make a video. And some of them aren't quite on point. So maybe I end up with 15 out of the 20. But if you're struggling of like, okay, I know I need to make video. I'm getting over the hurdle of like making it and looking at myself, which will go away. But like, what do I talk about? That's such a great way, in addition to using AI as a tool to come up with those ideas, to come up with some content and then just publish it. Like you said, if TikTok is not your friend for whatever reason, YouTube, I think, is definitely going in that direction. Facebook, Reels, right? Instagram has Reels. I mean, you can post it on any of those platforms, but the point is that you're putting it out there. And I don't think it's something that most attorneys are doing. So you will immediately differentiate yourself.
Yeah, and for what it's worth too, like my most of my views are on Instagram Reels. Like that's just where my network is that's interested in that kind of content. I think you still got to be on YouTube because of what you said, second largest search engine, but like don't underestimate all the socials. And I have like a checklist for okay, here's you make the content, then there's the places where you distribute it and the checklist is all hyperlinked. So it just like is like a quick flow. And also I'm thinking about okay, maybe eventually I do want to outsource this. And so having like a firm checklist of like, here's how you do this is really important. So while I don't have like a checklist of like, here's how I get clients, I do have checklists within marketing and other things, right?
How it actually gets done, yeah, and I think I mean, I would argue that's probably more important. I am curious because one other area I have found that I neglected stupidly for a long time was my existing client base. I kind of forgot about them, to be honest. Like, I'd serve them really well, and they would go off on their merry way, and then I would just keep producing, marketing content for everybody else, and then recently this year, it sort of hit me back on the side of the head of like, "What are you doing, you idiot? You have hundreds of people who have worked with you who know that you're really great and have really enjoyed working and having your services. Like, why aren't you tapping into those folks?" So I started this year once a month. That's kind of what I could commit to for now, is just creating a newsletter, again, providing information. It just sort of answers questions, talks about a very specific topic, just kind of, kind of like your law for kids, like just a really simple 250 words or less description of something, and I just use that to stay top of mind of existing clients, and I send it out to my newsletter list. And I guarantee once a month at least, somebody pops up and is like, "Oh, I've been meaning to reach out to you," right? And this kind of got me spurred to do it. So I'm curious, do you do anything with your existing or former clients to use that as a way to generate new business?
Well, that's the benefit of the subscription model is they're not former clients, they're current clients, right? Like even low touch, even if they go down a subscription level or go all the way back to entry level just to like have a small touch, right? Like I I have that engagement and I try to reach out every month to just make sure they're getting they're maximizing their subscriber benefits, right? And so like the financial incentives are aligned with the subscription model. And that's why one of the big things we push on the Law Subscribe podcast is leverage the subscription model in one form or another. Just you have to also understand that for folks that just don't want to subscribe, they're not your client. Because my whole thing is they must at a minimum be subscribed. And you know who else says that and their business is doing just fine? Costco and a lot of other businesses too, right? And so certainly you can. And I even just for the 100th episode of Law Subscribed at T and Joe on the podcast, and they have this idea called total monetization. And I think that's applicable even when you still have people in on a subscription model, which I do. I basically apply all the philosophies of total monetization as they were developing it, but you still must be a subscriber to get access to unbundled and rebundled and usage based services. Now they would push, well, you could do all that and make them not subscribe. Maybe you just charge higher unbundled services when you do that. I am a solopreneur. I could only manage so much, so I don't wanna actually do all that, but that's key for me. Another thing with all this content that we're talking about to help market help market the firms is you could schedule things. So you could do batch, like this joint series that we're doing, this was recorded and edited in batches. So in the same way, do what Lauren said, do and record a bunch of videos on these topics. And maybe some of them don't turn out really all that great, but then you don't use those. But for the ones that are quality enough, don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough, right? Schedule it. And you could schedule it to be weekly because the other thing is the algorithm will pick up on quality, frequent posters. Because if it's not about search and find with intention, it's about algorithmic discovery, then you want to be consistent with your publications, and the algorithm will pick up on that. Same thing is true if you're looking for a job and you just got to apply to things on LinkedIn, and the LinkedIn algorithm will pick up, hey, this person's searching, and tell all the recruiters that are relevant, go look at this person. They're actively looking. Well, we kind of want to trick the algorithm in the same way, which is why I try to record 1 minute videos for Lock for Kids podcast and just schedule it out every week. So something is posting every week, and I could do it all. Like I could do a year's worth of content in less than a month. And so that's the way to handle that. Now, there are risks. Something happens in the news or something happens crazy, and like this post went out and it's deemed as insensitive. So like there are some risks involved, but depending on the nature of your content, it might not, it might be okay. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think batching is absolutely critical. I think if we try and say, well, we'll just do it each week, it's that quote. Did you say it maybe recently? Or I heard it from somewhere like it's either easy now and hard later or hard now and easy later. And I think we can fall into the trap of, oh, well, I'll just do it on Friday for the following week. And then I'll keep doing that because it feels like less, but then Fridays blow up, right? And something comes up or there's a client emergency or you just like don't feel like it and you're not inspired that week and you're sitting looking at a blank screen going, "Oh my god, I have to come up with a newsletter or videos or social media content for the next week." So I find it very helpful to batch work. I block out a couple of hours, run through, as many as I can. Just the last 2 weekends, I think I created 20-ish newsletters. So one a week, right? I almost have quarter done, right? Actually, a half a year done. So that is super helpful. And yes, you have to be mindful of like, if I post this in June, is it still going to be relevant or could something happen? And then maybe that's something that you check in once a week or once every other week just to make sure the ones that you've got scheduled still make sense. But certainly doing batch work makes the process so much easier. And then you can kind of put it away for a little bit and then come back to it when you feel revitalized and it's not like a drudge every week that you're trying to create.
Yeah, and if your lawyer's probably listening to this, so you like jargon, so I'll give you some jargon. Evergreen content is the term, like, for, like, content that it doesn't matter if it's, it was 5 years ago or 5 years from now, some would even say 10, like, then that's evergreen content, it's still relevant. Look, laws are always changing, right? And context changes, who is running your government changes, and so, like, it's not necessarily perfectly evergreen, but if enough of it's evergreen, that's a good idea in terms of content creation. And I still even try to cover some newsy things happening sometimes, but then I just publish those as special episodes, right? And like that's how I will tackle that. Another jargony idea for you is brand affinity. And like when I'm doing the Law for Kids podcast, I'm trying to build brand affinity. I'm not even directly talking about what I'm selling. I'm trying to say, hey, look, this is a person, and I hope it's true. Like, I'm not just doing this like just for the sake of marketing, right? I hope it's true. But like, this is somebody who cares about making sure kids are educated and adults who never learned about legal concepts. Like, I genuinely care. And I'm trying to put quality content out there that could be jumping off points for teachers and classrooms to talk about these concepts, right? Or for parents to talk about it with their kids. So, like, it's coming from a genuine place, just like my volunteer work that leads to business. But find the right brand affinity play for you and build a strategy around that. And shout out to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing on the Legal Talk Network, because that's where I sort of was first introduced to that topic.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and it really takes the pressure off marketing. It can be this very overwhelming, even scary kind of concept, I think, for us as solopreneurs. Like, we're already juggling so many things, and now we have to be marketing experts. And there are folks all over my feed who would like to sell me their marketing expertise for, thousands of dollars a month. And so it sort of feels like, oh, we have to learn this too. But if you really take it as the idea of offering value. How can you help people who just happen to come across your content learn something very basic? How can you align it with something you're going to do anyway that means a lot to you, being a member of the community, helping a certain group, right? Showing up in a certain way. It should not be the sleazy car salesman. Like that is not the intention. It is not the intention of like go find a board just to sit on a board so you can sit there and like pitch your services. Like everyone will feel that very quickly and you will no longer be invited to be on boards. But if it's something that you genuinely would do anyway, for I have to remind myself is it is okay to talk about what I do as long as my intention is not necessarily to be a hard sell, but is just to say, hey, I was meeting up with, a parent and maybe they were talking about just financial security and it was just kind of the regular conversation. It is okay for me to say, yeah, I hear about that a lot with my clients because I do X, Y, and Z. I'm not trying to pitch them necessarily, but maybe just give them some information or just empathize with like, I understand that this is a really difficult situation and like I hear you and I deal with this every day and can I offer some information to help you or have you thought about this, right? And so it's not trying to be really forceful about it, but really just trying to find, like you said, where it aligns with what you're doing anyway. I think that's the best type of marketing because it doesn't feel like a used car salesman.
Yeah, and really we could talk about this probably, like I said, for joint series. So for the listeners, we'd love to hear from you. If there's any particular topic you want us to go even deeper on, something that we've maybe just barely mentioned, like even just branding, like branding yourself, like I'm the subscription attorney, right? Like things like that, all that's part of marketing and getting clients. And we even talk about like I'm sure there's a lot more steps on your list, Laura, and like of like closing, like how do you close a client? Like there's a lot more to talk about. Let us know. Obviously, reach out to us on social media. LinkedIn is great. A differentpractice.com, lawsubscribe.com. Since I use Substack for this, you could just comment on an episode if you want and say, well, I'd love to hear more about this. We will pay attention to the comments, to the DMs. We will do another episode on this. So please reach out about that.
Yes, please do reach out. We love your questions. Happy to give you specific wording we use, templates, checklists, but want to make sure that it's going to be valuable to you and what you're looking for. Stick with us because next episode we are going to continue on this discussion and talk about what do we actually say in terms of our elevator pitches? Like what are the words that we use to connect with a potential client? How did we develop that? What does that look like? And so stick with us. Come back around in the next episode and we'll dive even more into marketing.